Good evening, everyone out there in the World Wide Web, www. Welcome to Backroom Broadsides. It's a funny night. I've got Georgia on my mind. So, go Georgia. Join the world again. You haven't been with us since 1861. It's a chance. Anyway, leaving all of that aside, we have a really wonderful reading tonight. We've got Dorothy Friedman, August, and Ron Kolm. I'm going to begin with Dorothy, and then we're going to move over to Ron afterwards. What can I say? There's, to put it kind of in a broad perspective, Dorothy studied with John Ashbery at one point. I guess for me, what's so interesting about John Ashbery and the poetry that's come out of his wonderful poetry is this beautiful thing where at any point, like if you think of the old-fashioned lines, if you come to the end of the line and there's perhaps a rhyme that kind of hammers it to the line 2 lines above. But with Ashbery's work, and I would say also with Dorothy Friedman's now, Dorothy Friedman August, you're not so much looking for that wall at the end of the line, but it might pivot. There might be a joint. It might take you this way or that way, and you'll find yourself listening to these poems and imagining images, and if you're like me, you're going to say, how did I get here? What image led to this image? And where am I going? Beautiful stuff. Anyway, Dorothy Friedman August I'm going to read here. Dorothy Friedman August has published her work widely, including 2 books of poetry and 2 more books coming, including The L-Shaped Room and Drinking Alaska. She has received 2 New York Foundation Arts Fellowships and most recently an Acker Award. A former student of John Ashbery, as I said, at Brooklyn College, she herself teaches writing at Fordham University, CSI, and Empire State College. She also writes art and book reviews, edits a zine, White Rabbit, and is working on a memoir. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Dorothy Friedman August. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, James. Good to see you. Nice smiling face for the new year. You know, if I knew that I had to follow Laurel and Hardy, I might have read a whole different bunch of poems. So I was trying to think of which one of us, Ron or me, were Laurel and Hardy, and I guess I would have to be Laurel and he'd be Hardy. What can I say? Being the smaller of the 2. Anyway, I want to wish everybody a happy new year and thank Backroom Broadsides, Jocelyn, Patrick, and James for making the reading possible. And it's great to have poetry readings like this and be able to connect with one another during the difficult times that we're living through. I will be reading poems from a few collections, L-Shaped Room, Drinking Alaska, and a few short poems. I'm going to start with a short poem and then another short poem. Okay, this is called How People Were Born. People are born muddled in dreamscapes and trash cans. It was his coffee and her cup, the one she brought to his Lower East Side apartment from Crate and Barrel, It was the afternoon she murdered yet another set of parents and installed a new tinfoil liner in the trash can. Next time, people will be born securely fastened to their share of the weather report. The second short poem is called Parts of the City Are Always Dropping Off the Edge. Have you noticed? Even more so lately, actually. Parts of the city are always dropping off the edge, along with my glasses, which makes you think it's difficult to see clearly. But if you are an art historian, it's all in the frame. In an act of faith, take responsibility for everything, including yourself. Something worthwhile will surely show up as we work out this conundrum. Because, and you ask why, right? Because children come and go, and that's all we have, you know. These bisexual training bras and traumas. Birth parents here, parabolas there. One another's organs and paradoxes dropping in, like landlords from the sky. Okay, that was actually in a number of my poems are in the Brevitas collection. So, okay, the next poem is a little bit longer, but not much. It's called The Most Wanted Picture. It's a sort of Mother's Day poem, I guess, for some people, but not for others. Mother is the most wanted picture in the post office. Someone always finds her fingerprints somewhere and says, "You're it." Someone wants to borrow her for one night's dinner, a good meal in an Italian restaurant. That's the courtship. After the marriage, we provide her with gas, oil, water, and electricity. All the responsibility we have declined. She's easy. Her qualifications were put forth from birth. For her, there's no possibility of retirement. She watches us take all our young and foolish steps. She has the right disposition for this sort of thing. She watches us go anywhere, having gone nowhere. Going to sleep, she raises her hands above her chest. It will look as though she is flying for herself. Okay, what can I say? This is a poem that I imagined. I got up and I dreamt this poem, so I wrote it down. It's called Friedman's Fable, my name being Friedman. The attraction between the duck and the snake was never really mutual. Oh, by the way, I also use footnotes in this poem, so that is my most favorite part of the poem, actually, that it has footnotes. The attraction between the duck and the snake was never really mutual. Actually, she wanted desperately to catch a train, but they decided to get together one afternoon over biscuits to see if it hurt to break a commandment. It wasn't long before a Messiah dressed in Milky Way wrappers arrived, and fixing his eyes on these two, asked if their decision was intelligent. The duck fumbled with her blanket while the snake hid under a stone. After God told them he hoped their teeth would rot, the couple left for St. Thomas, each believing the rough spots could be worked out. Footnotes. 1. Duck living in an obscure fishing village off Key West. 2. Snake resides under a large rock. 3. They are still married. Okay, so speaking of John Ashbery and his workshop, he gave us the most delightful assignments to do. And even though he didn't actually give me this one, I invented it myself. And at the time, I didn't know it was unusual, but I thought it was sort of a reasonable thing to do. So I whizzed through a Japanese dictionary. And this is what I came up with, just whizzing through it and jotting down things as I whizzed through a Japanese dictionary. Because John always encouraged us to use outside sources for collaging, a lot of collaging and that kind of thing. But mostly it was magazines and things like that. But this is called My Bon Bon, and it's the alphabet poem. If you look in the album, my son is ever as he was. It was no alcohol and an almost balance, not like these electric bets. Bed and beefsteak, yes, sir. Once in a while, a belt of beer, but when the bell rang, he was the best. My boy, my bonbon, my biscuit. He was a boxing boy, a Boy Scout, a bonus baby, a bourgeois button, a bucket of brandy, a bullshitter, a busy broker of bread. He never had a boyfriend on the black list. My boy went to camp and ate caramels. He was the captain of his canoe and always had carbon paper. Ate his mother's cabbage, caught the ball. Was his mother's chance, champion. Handled a hammer, played the harmonica at night under a headlight. Wanted hearts, was a home run, a hotcake, a husband. Always good-humored, never hysterical. In summer, his ice cream never dripped an inch. He never got angry at inflation or influenza like Jazz and Jelly. His pens never ran out of ink. Jumped like a kangaroo in his khakis. Could kick like a king and kiss like a knife. Could knock out, knock up, and capture it all on Kodak. He was a lion, a leader, my man, my macaroon, my mandala, my march to the music, my memo, my modern, my numbers in a notebook. And there was no opera, no oranges, no pamphlets, no panorama. Papa, where was the rope for the ruby, the rhythm? Papa, where is Santa Claus in a scarf? I wanted a searchlight, a seesaw, or something to shower in the window. My sign could have been a silk hat, my signal a siren. Strike. The symbol is syrup. I am not tank. I am tenor on television. Come through this tunnel. I am the umpire of utopia. A velvet violin. Eat the wafer. No. Xylophones. No. Yes. Zero. Okay, so that's an encouragement to everyone who feels like it to be playful sometimes, if that is, especially with language. Let's put it with language, you see. Okay, so this is a short poem, which is, some of these poems are from the L-shaped room collection. It's called On a Small Block of Small and Smaller Houses. I play games. I sort the letters. It is a life. I was born to play with words on a small block of small and smaller houses. She wore a Madras blouse and skipped down 1974, where she met 3 Jews and a fag. We entered into a pact, and when we are gone, there will be more Jews and fags, and sometimes both. Okay, or something a little more sonorous, perhaps, depending on your ears. I love lyrical, musical poems myself, actually. This is called Shatter My Body, But Let My Spirit Roam Free. When all these lyrics have broken through the silences, I will be born into a more contemplative life, to be what I have always been and more, a thing unstuck from the womb of men and flying free into a more elaborate relationship with myself. Oh, mother, taste me. I am the song you almost sang, the one you never got to sing. But for all our essential differences, I am not an object at all, despite my small magical heart. Shatter my body, but let my spirit roam free into a more elaborate landscape where the kind birds feed us warmth in their kisses. A somewhat more romantic moment, and reminds me of romantic relationships. This is these two poems, and possibly the other one. They're all love poems of some sort, I guess. This is called Disturbance. You will always be a disturbance to the blood, simple child, lion, woman. So if I see nothing and my ears grow deaf, of all those raucous colors, yours remains to me alone. And somehow I began to dream of the morning we took each other from the oven like moist hides. Somehow I began to dream of playing blind man's bluff. And did I ever really draw you, or was it a child I colored? Oh, how I loved your wide-mouthed streets. I fingered you like an incoherent boy does the Torah. And we froze together in time, pouring our hot blood into each other. And when I think back about that disturbance, I think about this poem, which is also a lyrical poem. It's called Magic Bistro. Morning brings mercurial memories of wilder days, when gayness was our umbrella and cherchez la femme our song, creating you and me, letting go. I ran beside you wearing my checkered past. We had only the umbilical to go on. You plugged me up with mink, with drink and warmth from your magic bistro. Now, as men grope my spine and my teeth chatter, I think of all the places I've been, where breasts weave blankets with you and me inside warming each other. Now, each day brings spontaneous silences and even these verses as caresses. But if I run my hand over my soft, translucent heart, your voice is still there, shielding me from the coarse and stubbled universe. Somewhere bigger and more dangerous than here, we will speak the unspeakable so that this excitement can come again and another fierce fruit can blossom. And let's see. I guess this and the last poem after that. This is some myths about lesbians. Some myths about lesbians. When lesbians are ripe, they fall from branches. If you set a whiskey bottle on their heads, they dance. Their profile is shaped like a bird's head. They have thick, stubby bodies. Lesbians smash their toys as children. They will not leave their mother or their mother's lovers in peace. They are sullen. Lesbians are sent screaming and dinnerless to bed. They are not to be reasoned with. They slam their doors. Lesbians go out into the street. They are corrupt and ambiguous. Lesbians go out in groups. They fly south in squadrons and are much unsettled by the wind. They have messy hair and dirt in the complexion. Some people say they eat dirt and lizards for breakfast and have two rows of bony plates on their backs like Stegosaurus. Some say they eat curds out of each other's bellies and all wish they were married. You know something? I just want to let you know something at this point. Those plates, you know, that we've been carrying around all this time. Those plates get heavier all the time. We used our 4 spikes and our tails to keep attackers away. We learned to eat lizards. By the way, the first part I call the homophobic chorus, and the second part at the very end I call the lesbian response. And the last poem that I'll read is called The Buccaneer. And actually, it's the first line of it is, before my death, I showed a touch of tiger. And I actually wrote this poem right after I had a car accident in which I was glad that I was alive to write the poem. And that's actually how this poem originally got written. The Buccaneer. Before my death, I showed just a touch of tiger. My look said, I ain't pure. Now I'm an older, more innocent woman, and they are all still there, the small cars with headlights. Even before I was born, my mind was working, worrying about aunts and uncles. Now I have to concentrate to keep breathing. Once before I died, and no one noticed. Most people out there don't even look at you. You have to leave the world, let go of everything. Even go to Atlantic City. I want to do something. I want to unmarry everything, to look at the sun and the little people floating through. And when they say you are crazy, and they have occasionally, basically, you are soaring outside thunder. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, Dorothy.
Maybe
wow. That was beautiful. That was a messiah wrapped in Milky Way wrappers, man. That was gorgeous. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I going to move to the next poet, and I'm looking forward to that very much. But what a lovely reading that was. Anyway, I want to talk about Ron Kolm a little bit. Ron Kolm, for me, is kind of a face of poetry, because if you know New York, and if you've been going around New York, and I recently learned also in Edison, been around in the bookstores, work in so many bookstores where I'd be looking for the kind of weird books that people like me look for, and always a person you could talk about writing with, and was just an open person talking about writing. He was always open. And I really appreciated that. And his book that I first became aware of, Welcome to the Barbecue, it made me realize that there were things, there were like tracks underneath writing. There was the train and the station and the shops of Grand Central and all of that. But at the bottom of everything, what made the whole thing happen were the tracks. And his poetry is clean down to the skeletal bones of language. So I want to read now from this to introduce Ron. Ron Kolm is reading for the second time with Backroom Broadsides. Time was in 2018 at the Fox and the Crow, when we were doing these things live, in person, that is. We were doing them live now too, but we used to be able to put people in rooms back in the old days when I was young and Ron was young. And he gave a beautiful reading. People really enjoyed it. And his writing appears in 2 main books that we're all aware of, Welcome to the Barbecue and poetry, and his prose is Swimming in the Shallow End. Anyway, Oh, and Night Shift. I forgot Night Shift. I'm very sorry. Anyway, please let me introduce Ron Kolm again to Backroom Broadsides. Welcome back, Ron.
Thank you so much. I'm Happy New Year, everyone. And I'm scared stiff. That was such a beautiful reading Dorothy did. That was amazing. I'm kind of scared to follow her, if I can be really honest. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. I'll go ahead and read some poems. There's short ones, long ones. I'll do the titles and then keep on going. This is called Absence Makes the Heart. Gertrude Stein was known to drink from time to time a tall glass of sparkling water because there was no there. It's a new poem called Going Home. One of my favorite books is Anne Sexton's The Awful Rowing Toward God. In the last poem, she plays a game of cards with God and loses. Not too long after finishing that book, she went to her garage, started up her car, and drove to heaven, perhaps to challenge God to a rematch. One of Dorothy Friedman's assembling magazines was the John Ashbery issue, and I wrote this poem, which I've dedicated to Dorothy for that issue. It's called The Ascension of John Ashbery. John Ashbery read at Poet's House. He read downstairs, surrounded by a hushed and adoring crowd. He was comfortably seated in a movable chair, and after reading his poetry, he stayed in that fixture as he was helped out of the room and up to the second floor, where the bulk of the library is and where wine was being served. It seemed as if the entire crowd of well-wishers was pitching in to raise him up with their collective will so that he appeared to float above us all. He would eventually rise all the way up to Frank O'Hara's heaven, but not yet, not yet. Oh, years ago, a group of poets I was a part of called the Unbearables, we used to pick at the New Yorker every December 7th, and we'd each take a long poem from the New Yorker and we'd translate it into everyday speech. There was a guy named Sparrow who would assign us our poems, and this was a poem that was written by Philip Levine, and I changed it into everyday speech. The summer they killed the Spanish poet. It's the end of summer. My mother avoids the windows of our suburban house. She opens her purse and checks the contents, looking for Kleenex amid the clutter to blot her tears, because she's going to visit the gypsies, hoping they'll hook her up with her dead husband. She kisses me goodbye, taking one last look in her purse. I look too, and I'm astonished to see a tiny tableau inside, a perfectly proportioned Garcia Lorca about to meet his end at the hand of a miniature firing squad, though how a kid like myself knows this, I'll never tell. My mother shuts her purse and leaves. Oh, now we head into the Trump poems, given where we're at on the historical timeline. This is called Frankenstein. I saw the Living Theater perform Frankenstein in Philadelphia many years ago. The cast members climbed up a series of flat platforms until they formed the body of the monster. The only thing I knew about Trump back then was that his casinos sucked. I had no idea I was watching the perfect metaphor for what he would later become, for what he is now, in my opinion. This is a long piece I haven't read in a while. It was actually part of an artwork of the artist Shalom Newman, and it was in a piece that was in Venice many years ago, and I actually had a chance to go to Venice and hear this read, saw it performed or whatever. It's called Black Snake Moan for Shalom, who incorporated it into a fusion art piece. The Standing Rock Sioux had a bad dream, and that dream was of a big black snake, and they all knew right away what their dream meant. And it did not mean something good. They knew that too. The Sioux took this dream as a warning that outsiders were going to poison their water, that their water was about to be cursed. This water was Lake Oahe, and the snake was the Dakota Access Pipeline, and the blood that filled the black snake and that made the snake evil was oil, the lifeblood still of the non-native folks who surrounded the Cheyenne River Reservation from sea to polluted sea. The same non-native Americans who had taken their land so many years ago and who continue to destroy it right up to this very day, even though everyone knows better. Because the good folks of Bismarck, North Dakota, all had dreams too, but their dreams were different. There were no snakes in their dreams unless they were dreaming about sex. In their no-dreaming life, they had pushed the black snake some distance away because on some level, even they knew that the black snake was death, and they had the power to keep it away from their water, but not so far away that they couldn't suck blood out of it from time to time. Their way of life depended on it. Many years ago, old blues musicians sang about the black snake, but to them it was something else. It meant sex and life, not death. But they soon knew that now it doesn't mean sex or life. It only means they're getting screwed. The black snake kept slithering closer, and soldiers and police came to protect it and the way of life it represented. But then other Native Americans and kind folks like them from all over the country arrived to keep the snake at bay and to protect the way of life that had been disappearing for so many years, creating a standoff. And then 2,000 armed volunteers, some of them members of Black Lives Matter, and some who were military vets, showed up to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Standing Rock Sioux. And this gave pause to the great Black Father, who was more or less running the country, and he said, let the snake go elsewhere. We can work something out. But he was replaced by a very evil huckster who undid this great notion and said, no, I like the great black snake. Let it crawl all over the land. And his tiny white snake stood up, or tried to stand up, and cheer. Death is a soldier. What he really is a middle-aged guy who reads a lot of books on military history and dreams what the world would be like if Hitler had won the war. He sits in a neighborhood bar watching TV. Every time he looks up at the screen, something happens. Coronavirus erupts in China. Trump opens his mouth. Death smiles and sips his drink as these disasters occur. Yes, he thinks, I guess I'll have one more. And this is before the revolution. National Guardsmen dressed in riot gear surround the twisted wreckage of our president's shiny black limousine. His private jet, clearly labeled Trump, taxis down the runway, then slowly ascends, turning towards Russia. Who, of course, didn't hack anyone's computers or anything. I'd still love to see that tape, the P tape. I'm going to shut up. Love songs. I know a lovely lady with a generous heart. Together we read Leonard Cohen's poems. Turn off the lights and lower the shade, she laughs. This bed's about to sail. I fire up my laptop, filling the room with music. Round the world cruise. She smiles at me, then leans back in her deck chair as we end our vacation with a cruise across the Pacific. A full moon shines high above the dark waters. I twist in my seat and return her smile, wondering how much money we still have left in the bank. And then these are the bookstore poems. It's called Garbage Run. One of my duties in the bookstore is to take out the trash. One night, not so long ago, I was carrying a big stack of flattened cardboard boxes down the steep flight of steps behind the store when I slipped and fell hard on my left hand. A passerby helped me up and we both stared at my index finger, which now resembled a swastika. He walked me into the store where the manager, upon seeing my hand, sent me immediately to the City MD on 14th Street. The doctor there, a young man, tried as hard as he could to straighten my finger, but nothing worked, so he sent me to the nearby emergency room at Lenox Hill Hospital. It was a Saturday night in the West Village, always an interesting time. A bunch of disco refugees staggered into the waiting room looking for a toilet. Sorry, it's flooded, the guard said. They didn't believe him, but they split, calling him an asshole as they left. A disheveled guy came in, probably homeless, and sat down beside me. He took off his right shoe, then his sock. Then he popped his dislocated big toe back into place. I envied him, wishing I could do that with my finger. I was finally seen by a doctor who looked at my hand, sucked on her tongue, and said, "I've seen this before." She grabbed my index finger and yanked it hard. There was a tearing sound, but it worked. I made a mental note that a woman had succeeded where a man had failed, thanked her immensely, and went home. And then this was the story of what happened to me. I was working in Poems and Books in Chelsea Market when the pandemic hit. We had hand sanitizers all over the store. They did just reopen a short while ago, but this was a poem I wrote about the last day I worked there. It takes a pandemic to end a 50-year career of working in New York City independent bookstores, which included the Strand, East Side Books, New Morning, Coliseum Books, St. Mark's Bookshop, and Postman Books, which closed on March 16th due to the virus. The last book I sold there was Camus' The Plague, and that's a true story. And the guy who bought it was a Brit who would be flying home soon because basically, I think people weren't going to be allowed in the country for a while. I think people who were like trying to fly here from Europe actually weren't allowed into the country. A subway story in the time of COVID-19. I had to travel into Manhattan to cash my unemployment check. So I sat in the front car, wearing a mask, doing my best to avoid the other passengers. After leaving the bank, I walked back to Union Square Station and found a place on the platform where there weren't too many people standing around waiting. Time goes by and no train appears. There's a sudden movement and a woman, maybe late 50s, tosses her bag and her mask onto the tracks, then clumsily climbs down and joins them. "Hey, what's up?" I shout through my mask. She moans and says this is how she's going to get home. She's tired of everything. She edges over towards the third rail, and unfortunately, because my back is so messed up, I can't physically grab her, so I unleash my best zinger. "Do you believe in any kind of God? Because if you do, you got to know how pissed off he or she's going to be if you touch that thing." A young guy comes running over, jumps onto the tracks, lifts the lady up, depositing her on the platform. He holds her, waiting for the police, who do show up pretty quickly. My train finally arrives, and I go home amazed at how the universe works. And that's my reading, and I thank you so much, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you, Ron Kolm.
Thank you.
Boy, I'll tell you, there's a special kind of horniness you get from this COVID-19 being in our homes thing. And the one kind of horniness that I really, really, really feel, like a cat howling in the backyard, I feel I need my New York City. I need to walk around New York City, and your poetry, it kind of brings me there, man. Thank you. It's just some kind of, I don't know, this swaggering feeling of walking down the sidewalks, and it's a little too dirty, and it's so human, New York City. Anyway, thank you, Ron Kolm, for that beautiful reading. I hope we have you guys again at Backroom Broadsides. And to the folks out there
I hope we all get a chance to sit down and have a beer together in the not too distant future.
Now there is an idea, a beer together, like holding it and clinking the glasses together, not thinking that we're exchanging horrible nuclear bombs with each other, you know. Well, folks, what can I say? It's been another great night for Backroom Broadsides. These two poets were wonderful tonight, and I applaud both of you, Dorothy Friedman, August, and Ron Kolm. I'm going to be thinking about a jacket made of Milky Way wrappers from listening to Dorothy. And Ron is always a joy. I know whenever I walked into a bookstore and I saw him behind the thing, it happened a couple of times, and I wasn't expecting him. Anyway, I want to thank all of you. The next reading is going to be on February 2nd. Don't have the details locked quite in yet, but it should be a very good one. And when we know more about it, we'll certainly get it out and send you all invites. Anyhow, have a great week. Go Georgia. Come back home, baby.